Well, maybe we'll go on a quest for your sense of humor, a Jonny
Yes.
Quest.
Yeah.
So this is my individual thing of the week. I've actually been watching for the last few weeks when I've been doing something else. I've been putting episodes of this on semi in the background, so like 3/4 watching.
Mhm.
Which for a 1960s Hanna Barbera cartoon doesn't take that much effort. I wasn't really very versed in this. I just came up on Max and I said, well, why not?
Mm.
Uh, I watched some video a while back about the history of Hanna Barbera's animation music, and
Right.
apparently the soundtrack for Jonny Quest is always a huge seller, or at least I should say it's a big seller by the standards of cartoon soundtracks. And yeah, it's got this awesome big band style, and I can see why people would just want to put that on in the background and listen to it.
Yeah.
It very very exciting, very dynamic, very well instrumentated, if that's a word. Very
Yeah.
well played. Um, I think what kind of startled me about this show was okay. How to put this? I am not generally in favor of sensitivity warnings and the like.
Yeah.
Um, I generally think that you can't judge things from the past by the exact standards of today. There were some things in here that made me kind of uncomfortable. Like and I think some of it was just working in the 60s in kids animation. Uh like you're not going to have the resources to get actual lines in Arabic for your circle of like 4 or 5 voice actors to properly pronounce Arabic. But you could probably have done it a little bit better than like they weren't quite that bad, but it was basically just sounds that sound kind of Arabic if you don't know Arabic.
Yeah. Oh.
Um, quick sidebar: there was a parody in the show Freakazoid that was just like a perfect style parody of Jonny Quest. I can't remember the name of it, but at one point they had one of the characters shout, "Take this, you heathen monkeys," which I just took to be a ridiculous moment of like them just being silly with their parody. And then I'm watching the episode where the quests are trying to save some captured adventurers from a group of headhunters in South America, and Ray Spannon there actually shouts out, "Take this, you heathen monkeys!"
Oh. Oh. Oh.
I should note that in the context of the parody, he was shouting at a giant robot, I believe. So it was either a giant robot or a group of police officers. I forget which.
Yeah. Ooh.
Um, but it occurs to me, I've kind of jumped into the what surrounds it. So the basic premise is that you have Doctor was it Quentin Quest, I believe,
Yeah.
is the dad. He and his son Johnny and his army um, veteran buddy Ray Spannon go out on adventures along with their adopted Indian friend Haji, which that's a very interesting name to give a character because that's basically the term for a Muslim who has gone on the pilgrimage to Mecca. Which like that, well, why would a small child have that name? But that's probably just another case of
Yeah.
they probably just opened up a Arabic dictionary or something and picked a name that they thought sounded fun to say.
Yeah.
And then the little animated, and then their little cartoon dog Bandit, for the kids.
Yes.
And it's a very varied show. Okay, so I kind of was giving it some criticism a minute ago, just because again, cultural standards have definitely changed, and sometimes it isn't all the worse.
Yeah.
Um, maybe you don't need to have Bugs Bunny gleefully shooting down Indians in a western. Um, but the positives of it, so the art style is the art direction was done by a comic book artist named Alex Toth, and because of the kind of limited animation of the period, it's got way better. It almost looks in places like an animated comic book, like a semi-animated comic book. And then there are moments, and what's interesting is that by the standards of 60s Hanna Barbera animation, this is as close to lifelike as you could really get. As in, like, all the characters basically look human. They're the animals are like, Bandit is obviously a little bit anthropomorphized and cartoony, but not like hugely so.
Yeah, not like Scooby Doo or
Exactly.
or
Yeah.
Astro. Yeah.
Yeah. They go to a lot of varied and wild locations, and the plots are kind of interesting because they vary between plausible and I had a week to write this thing, and or just I wanted to do a wild adventure thing. It's like one episode. They are asked by the government of a unspecified Latin American country to go investigate some reports of people disappearing at this ancient pyramid.
Yeah.
And it turns out that a British guy with a pith helmet has been recruiting a bunch of the natives to help ransack the local treasures.
Yeah.
And so the Quest family ends up in the middle of this, and they have a harrowing escape as they also help bring this guy to justice. Now, I would say that as plots go, a lot of it was very plausible, right? Especially for like the time, right? And also, they had fairly grim things, like the way that the natives would kill somebody who refused to cooperate was they would tie them out in the sun and leave them for the ants.
Oof.
Which the quests do save someone from that. It's like, okay, yeah, this is a pretty down-to-earth adventure. And then they're attacked by a giant cave spider, which is a spider about the size of a cat. Which Ray sees as like, a giant cave spider. And nobody's like, what the heck is that? No, everyone's just like, nope, giant cave spider, entirely ordinary, what we would expect to see in a cave. Yep, makes sense.
Yeah.
So would I recommend it? I had a good time with it as a first experiment. I would say it's better than the 90s Cartoon Network. I think it was a Cartoon Network original that they had on there with the bad CGI show too, paired with it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. What I would say is that the mindset you have to have going into it is that you are still watching a 1960s kids cartoon. So, the animation isn't going to be lavish, but I kept being impressed by, like, I remember there was this one scene of two polar bears frolicking that I just kept thinking, that is shockingly well animated for the era. Like, the animators were really trying, in my opinion. They were just, and it definitely always goes for the gusto as far as creativity goes.
Well,
you have to kind of remember the 1960s were not the most accepting time.
Yeah, not a lot of political correctness. No.
Nope. So I would say there's a bunch of episodes on Max. If you're watching and you find an episode distasteful, skip on to the next one. It's not like there's an ongoing narrative or anything.
Yeah, shows back then, especially kids' cartoons, they were very episodic. Yeah, you didn't have to, watch the previous episode and know what's going on next.
Yep. So semi-recommend. You're watching it for the interesting production values and just turning your brain off a little bit. You aren't watching if you know you're going to be offended by some not entirely sensitive portrayals of different peoples.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my mom watched this show when she was a kid, because she would have been around that age. Yeah.
Well, I happened to mention around Christmas that I was watching a bit of it, and my mom and aunt both immediately said, "Oh, Jonny Quest was great." I have a feeling that they have forgotten the things like the heathen monkeys line
Yeah.
in the interim.